What if the reason an avoidant pulls away is the same reason they keep thinking about you when you are not there? It is not about looks, effort, or how much you care. It is the lack of pressure you bring, the way you do not force emotion, and the calm you keep when others rush to define everything too quickly. That presence creates space instead of tension. Some people are not first drawn to intensity. They are drawn to distance, mystery, and the feeling of someone who does not demand immediate clarity. Quiet energy creates a stronger internal reaction than loud effort. Many people miss this and believe value comes from proving more or trying harder, but attraction often grows from steadiness, emotional self-possession, and not clinging. Ask yourself if you are trying to be chosen through effort or becoming someone whose presence feels safe, free, and unforgettable. Emotional self-containment is not coldness or pretending not to care. It is the ability to stay steady within yourself without constantly reaching for reassurance, clarity, or emotional rescue from another person. When attention shifts, replies slow, or energy changes, most people react quickly. They overthink, chase, or try to fix the feeling before they even understand it. A self-contained person responds differently. They feel the moment fully but do not collapse into it. They remain grounded, and that grounded state communicates something very different in connections where avoidance exists. It signals, I can stay here without forcing it, without flooding you, and without making you responsible for my emotional balance. That presence matters. When someone does not rush to define the bond or demand closeness before trust is built, the interaction becomes layered and quietly alive rather than chaotic. Calm detachment works similarly. It is presence without entanglement. Once emotional urgency fades, attraction begins to shift away from performance and toward perception. Instead of focusing on who is trying the hardest, the mind starts noticing who remains steady without needing constant validation. That kind of stability feels rare. It is not loud or attention-seeking, but it stands out because it is not easily shaken. Over time, rarity becomes magnetic because it cannot be fully controlled, rushed, or completely understood at once. There is also something compelling about emotional depth that is felt but not fully decoded. Not emotional walls or silence used as protection, but real depth that is visible enough to sense, yet quiet enough to keep curiosity alive. It creates a space where the mind keeps returning, not because of confusion, but because there is always more to understand. When someone reveals everything too quickly, the mind tends to sort them almost instantly. The sense of mystery disappears early, and with it, curiosity often fades. But when a person expresses emotion without exposing everything at once, something different begins to happen. The interaction stays open instead of feeling finished. It creates the sense that there is more underneath, more experience, more thought, more meaning, that has not been fully handed over. This leaves a quiet mental loop where the mind revisits the interaction, trying to understand what it felt but could not completely define. For avoidant individuals in particular, this can feel engaging because it allows closeness without invasion. There is enough emotional signal to maintain interest, but not enough intensity to trigger withdrawal. That balance between presence and restraint is often where attention naturally deepens and lingers over time. Controlled inconsistency is often mistaken for chaos, but it is something very different. It is not hot and cold behavior, and it is not emotional unpredictability used to confuse someone. Instead, it reflects the natural rhythm of a person who has an active inner life that cannot be reduced to a fixed pattern. When every interaction feels identical in tone, timing, and emotional access, the mind adapts too quickly and stops noticing detail. Predictability can feel safe, but too much of it reduces curiosity. On the opposite end, extreme inconsistency creates anxiety and mistrust. Controlled inconsistency sits in the middle of these extremes. It carries variation without instability, showing that attention is real but not mechanically constant. For avoidant individuals, this can feel less like emotional risk and more like independence, signaling that your life does not revolve entirely around the connection itself. When emotional pressure increases or distance appears, most people react immediately. They explain more, chase harder, or try to close the gap as quickly as possible. That reaction usually comes from discomfort with uncertainty. But non-reactivity under emotional pressure creates a very different impression. Instead of rushing to fix silence or shifts in tone, a grounded person stays present with the moment without collapsing into it. They feel what is happening internally, but they do not abandon their own stability in response. This kind of steadiness quietly communicates that connection is not dependent on constant reassurance or instant emotional repair. Even when energy changes, they do not escalate into pursuit, and when the other person begins to chase harder, it often amplifies imbalance rather than resolving it. Staying composed in those moments preserves depth because it prevents the connection from turning into pressure-driven reaction, or they shut down and withdraw completely as a way to protect themselves. But non-reactivity creates a different kind of response. You notice the shift, you feel the change in energy, but you do not let it turn into urgency or emotional escalation. There is no over-chasing, no over-explaining, no attempt to fix the discomfort immediately, and no emotional punishment in return. You stay steady without amplifying the situation. That steadiness interrupts the usual cycle most people fall into. Instead of distance leading to panic, pursuit, guilt, or conflict, something unfamiliar happens. Calm meets distance. Composure meets ambiguity. Silence is not treated like a crisis that needs solving right away. This alone changes the emotional tone of the connection because uncertainty is no longer paired with pressure or consequence, and the interaction starts to feel more breathable, stable, and grounded. Stable boundaries add another layer to this effect. These are not rigid walls or emotional withdrawal disguised as strength, and they are not inconsistent limits that shift depending on mood or intensity. Real boundaries remain steady regardless of emotional pressure. They do not expand just because someone is pushing closer, and they do not disappear just because someone pulls away. That consistency sends a very clear message that access is not controlled by emotional urgency. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this can feel relieving rather than threatening because it removes the expectation of constant emotional negotiation. The nervous system no longer has to prepare for sudden demands or shifting rules. Instead of interpreting intensity as something that changes everything, it learns that structure stays intact. Over time, that predictability builds trust, and what once felt like pressure begins to feel like safety and respect. Alongside that, intellectual resonance becomes a quieter but powerful form of attraction. It is not about dramatic chemistry or immediate emotional intensity, but about the sense that conversation itself feels alive and meaningful. Ideas flow easily, understanding deepens naturally, and interaction feels like exploration rather than obligation. For someone who values autonomy, this kind of connection feels safer because it does not demand emotional exposure too quickly. There is no pressure to confess everything internally or define every feeling on the spot. Instead, the bond develops through shared thought, curiosity, and subtle understanding. It allows closeness without forcing vulnerability before trust is ready. Over time, this kind of mental alignment can feel more grounding than intensity because it strengthens connection without overwhelming personal space, creating a sense of depth that grows steadily rather than abruptly. A sentence lands differently when it feels precise rather than overwhelming. A perspective opens without being forced. Even a simple look can carry the message, You see what I see. And that kind of recognition can feel powerful because it creates understanding without demanding full emotional exposure. When that pattern begins, conversation naturally develops anticipation. You start wondering what they will notice next, what angle they will take, how the same moment might be interpreted in a slightly new way. That quiet curiosity builds its own momentum. It may not feel intense on the surface, but it has depth because it keeps discovery alive. And discovery is what brings people back. They return not because they were pulled, but because something in the interaction makes them feel more mentally engaged, more aware, more connected to meaning as it unfolds. The absence of neediness plays a major role in this dynamic. It does not mean acting indifferent or emotionally distant. It simply means your sense of self is not dependent on how the other person responds. You are not placing the responsibility for your emotional stability onto them. There are no hidden demands underneath your presence, no expectation that they must constantly confirm your worth or regulate your feelings. You offer connection, but you do not cling to it. You show interest without trying to control timing or response. You leave space without turning that space into pressure. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this removes one of the strongest internal triggers, the feeling of emotional obligation. When that pressure is not present, the interaction feels lighter. Every pause is no longer interpreted as a problem. Every delay is no longer assigned meaning. The connection becomes something that can exist without constant evaluation. This creates a subtle paradox. The less someone feels responsible for your emotional balance, the safer they often feel moving closer to you. Closeness stops feeling like something that traps or demands constant performance and instead feels like something open and breathable. It becomes an experience they can enter without losing themselves and step away from without consequence. That kind of emotional atmosphere is rare, and rarity naturally increases value, not in a manipulative sense, but in a grounded one. Over time, the mind begins to associate your presence with ease rather than pressure, with clarity rather than emotional weight. That association is what makes you memorable in a quieter, more lasting way. There is also something important about not rushing to define the connection too early. Many people try to secure certainty quickly because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. They want answers, labels, and guarantees before the experience has fully formed. But in dynamics where avoidance exists, that urgency often creates resistance. It is not always a lack of feeling, but a response to speed that feels overwhelming. When things are slowed down, the emotional environment changes. Meaning is allowed to develop instead of being forced into place too soon. There is room for tension without it turning into panic. There is space for discovery instead of premature conclusions. And in that space, attraction often grows more steadily because it is based on what is gradually understood rather than what is immediately declared. This is where patience becomes powerful. People tend to trust what they arrive at on their own more than what they are pushed toward. When there is no pressure to decide too quickly, they are able to notice their own internal movement more clearly. If interest is present, that space allows it to deepen naturally instead of being interrupted by urgency. Many misunderstand urgency as sincerity, but urgency is often rooted in anxiety rather than clarity. In contrast, steady presence combined with openness allows desire to mature at its own pace. It gives curiosity time to develop memory, and memory is what makes connection stay in the mind long after the moment has passed. Another important layer is emotional economy, the ability to express something meaningful without overwhelming the moment. Not every feeling needs to be fully released the moment it appears. Sometimes restraint allows emotion to carry more weight rather than less. A few calm, honest words can land more deeply than an extended explanation driven by fear or uncertainty. For someone who is sensitive to emotional intensity, this matters because too much expression too quickly can feel like pressure rather than connection. Emotional economy creates space around communication. It lets meaning settle instead of flooding the interaction all at once, making it easier for the other person to stay present with what is being shared. This is not about acting indifferent or trying to appear detached. It is about respecting timing, respecting emotional depth, and understanding that not everything meaningful has to be amplified to be real. There is a quiet strength in someone who can say they enjoyed a moment and leave it there without turning it into pressure. Strength in expressing interest without converting that interest into expectation. Strength in holding emotion with steadiness rather than urgency. When that kind of emotional composure is felt consistently, it leaves an impression. You start to sense that this person is not being driven by impulse. They can feel deeply without losing their internal balance, want something without collapsing into it, and care without needing constant reassurance in return. That creates a kind of attraction that feels calm, mature, and surprisingly hard to forget. There is also a subtle pull in someone who is fully present in the moment and fully at peace when the moment ends. This is not something that can be easily performed because it comes from inner stability rather than technique. When they are with you, they are genuinely there, listening, noticing, responding, creating something real in that interaction. But when it ends, they do not chase it, overextend it, or try to force continuity just to avoid silence. They allow it to settle naturally. That creates contrast, and contrast is what gives emotional experience shape in memory. Without pauses, everything blends together. With clean presence followed by clean space, the experience begins to echo instead of blur. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this can feel especially significant because it allows closeness without suffocation. The connection is felt, but not forced to stay active beyond its natural moment. It does not cling to them or follow them into every private mental space. Instead, it leaves room for reflection, for interpretation, for the quiet replay of what was experienced. Often, this is where attraction deepens most, not during the interaction itself, but afterward, in the stillness, in the mental revisiting, in the subtle realization that something about it felt different from what they are used to. That is why emotional pacing matters so much. It is not only about what happens during connection, but what remains in the nervous system after it ends. Pressure creates resistance, space creates return. So the aim is not to become unforgettable by being louder, more intense, or more emotionally demanding. It is to be coherent, fully present when present, and fully at ease when absent. That kind of consistency builds trust, and trust is often what allows deeper fascination to grow over time. Underneath this is a simple but important truth. Many avoidant patterns are not rooted in emotional absence, but in sensitivity to pressure, loss of autonomy, and emotional intensity that arrives too quickly. What often draws them in is not overwhelming emotion, but connection that feels safe to approach without feeling controlled by it. When someone can offer warmth without grasping, interest without neediness, and boundaries without punishment, something in that internal defense system relaxes. And when defense relaxes, curiosity becomes possible, attention becomes available, even deeper emotional engagement becomes possible. This is why the strongest pull is often not the most visible one. It is quieter, steadier, and more grounded, but it lasts longer because it does not trigger resistance. So the real question is not how to create more intensity, but what kind of presence allows another person to feel free while staying connected. Usually, it is a presence that is calm, self-contained, emotionally disciplined, and gently warm without being demanding. It does not push for attention or chase validation. It creates space where connection can unfold without pressure. And in that space, something interesting happens. Closeness stops feeling like obligation and starts feeling like choice. That is what makes it sustainable, and that is what makes it stay in the mind long after the moment has passed. The deeper truth in all of this is simple. Real connection doesn't survive on pressure, urgency, or emotional chasing. It survives on steadiness, clarity, and the kind of presence that doesn't lose its shape when emotions shift. When someone can stay grounded in closeness and still remain grounded in absence, the interaction stops feeling like something fragile that must be constantly managed. It becomes something that can breathe on its own. What stays with people is not intensity that overwhelms them, but calmness that respects their space while still being fully present. Not emotional excess, but emotional balance. Not demand, but invitation. And over time, that kind of energy doesn't just create attraction, it creates trust. And trust is what makes any connection last beyond the moment. In the end, what truly leaves a mark is not who tries the hardest to be remembered, but who makes connection feel safe enough that the mind returns on its own.